All right. So everybody's here who accepted, so we'll get started. Put some notes and thanks for responding to them, looking them over and being Kyle, and I think Lily, you did as well, looking at them in advance, which is great, even though just started updating those like a couple hours ago. It helps us move along efficiently. So my first question is, how much feedback did we get on improving the idle MR triage issues? Which things should we do and should we not do?
So I think the most resounding feedback that we got is using the reports is hard because there's no links. And that's something that we are looking to correct with the issue that I linked to. There's an MR that Jinpin opened. Yep, B. Sorry, I should have ordered them correctly.
No worries.
And there's an MR to fix that before the next generation, which I think runs on the 8th.
I think the concern was, if I remember correctly, that if we did that, then it would show them as no longer idle, but then perhaps we found a way to not make that happen. It wouldn't show as an update to the issue.
At worst case scenario, what we want to see is if we just put the whole URL instead of just the short reference, can it get through our spam detection? And like, we just want to observe the behavior, because then instead of just having to construct the URL on their own, there's at least something to copy and paste.
Okay.
That's still not the most ideal solution, but I think that's the boring solution that we came up with.
That sounds good. Yeah, I remember seeing some before I went on. Was doing other things for 2 weeks. I remember seeing that. Cool. How about the other two? Where would those be in the priorities, do you think? Nudge merge request without a group label and the other one.
Hold on. I don't know why I said just how to handle them. Let me see what I linked to.
Probably a copy somewhere else.
Yeah, well, I think it was just more. I didn't complete my thought. Who to assign to.
Okay.
The issues too. So like that was a comment I think you made. So the first one, nudging merge requests without a group label. I kind of commented on this down below. I think instead of nudging, a better behavior here might be to try to just apply labels automatically. So I listed some suggestions down below. And this is on A, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Jumping all over the place. But I have some suggestions on how we could do that. I don't think this is and to be clear, this isn't a high priority item from engineering productivity. Mm-hmm. We're really focused on driving down pipeline duration over a lot of workflow efficiency efforts at the moment.
That being said, one thing I learned last week is we are likely going to have a KR or a KR that goes with an O, an objective on, or maybe just a metric and a goal on percentage of merge requests that take more than 30 days or something like that. I heard that a couple times in discussion, so that is not officially something we want to do yet, but it is being discussed. So definitely need to keep track of, we can't have, 5 number 1 priorities. We can have, maybe 1, maybe 2. So, but to do these things, we need this stuff to be a priority, definitely. But this might be one of the priorities coming, so we can make time.
I see. I'll chat with Mac. So you said that was a OKR and not like a
maybe.
KPI.
It's a maybe okay or KPI. I'm not sure. It was discussed a couple different ways, maybe twice. So
yeah, I think we have that we have it listed as a dev PI, just like the open to merge. The target in there is pretty arbitrary, like random. I have to circle back with Christopher on that, but we have it in the dev handbook page. I'll link it. Let me find it.
I think the priority of it might go higher. So do you think you said the most important one was 1A? Do you think but you said that one's in flight already, so we don't need to, we're able to get that done or get that moving even though it's not one of our top priorities. Is that accurate, Kyle?
1B is in flight. That one should be done. 1A, I think, is the next item and this is my perception. So I went through the feedback prior to the meeting and tried to identify what I thought was the best representative feedback from what I've seen. I think 1A would be the next one where those issues are invisible to the triage report. If there's no group label, there's no DRI to act on them. I think the first kind of solution that we might want to do is just apply a general automation, which would cover more than just idle MRs, to apply a default group label based on project.
Wait, are you on number 2, or the downward trend?
The solution to 1A, I think, is captured in 2. So we could nudge, but I think a better place to start rather than merge is just to apply a group label automatically by project. And the reason being is that I just, if they're idle, I don't know what that nudge is going to do. It will also remove them from the idle triage report. So.
Yeah, I'm good with that. And then C, 1C, what are your thoughts on that? Kudos on issues too, or is that kind of related to 1A?
I just wanted to pull this in because I thought it was it was like discussion that was left open, and maybe there was a close point. So Tiago was kind of talking about some not counter arguments, but just counterpoints to some of our assumptions, and I just wondered if we wanted to make any changes based on the suggestions.
Okay. So summary. 1B, we already have in flight, which is improve the usability with linking to the merge request. 1A, about nudging merge requests without a group label, we're going to talk about as part of item 2. And 1C, we'll reconsider in the future, which was who to assign the issues to.
Yeah. And Wayne, I think what would be helpful there is if you would review that, because it was a response to your comment, and just see if there's any assumptions or anything in the report that you think we would need to change.
Okay, will do. Any other thoughts on item 1? Item 1 and all the sub items. Hey, Christopher, welcome back, by the way.
Do we know what's the population ratio here between, like, if we have like 100 MRs total? Is it like 10 MRs that are more than 30 days, or is it 20, or is it?
I think
more?
It's actually in that that Periscope chart. If you click in item number 2, it should show you that. So let's jump over to that. So I didn't see a downward trend yet. We can maybe I didn't update it. Actually, that's not true. Okay, I did do the update. It took a little while. So I do see it. So idle MRs is down to, I'm going to say, in the 750 range. It hasn't been there since late April. So maybe it's not a trend yet. Thanks for sharing. I'd want to see another week or 2 there, but it looks like it's moving in the right direction. I see some nodding, which is great. That's awesome. So I'm going to change my comment. I think I didn't wait for the refresh in Sisense to complete. So it is going the right. It seems like the next big thing to go after is the items that don't have a group. Because if they don't have a group, that's half of them. Roughly half. Yeah, almost exactly half. That is probably the reason that they're idle, is that groups aren't tracking them because they're not on their radar. Perhaps it's a theory. So what do folks think about that?
We had this thing in our backlog to label MRs from the team's authors with the group label. Wouldn't that solve this? Because we departed from that because there was a lot of focus on MR rate now, which is member base. And also like the cost efficiency that we've been focusing on. But that should help though, right? Because if we know who the author is, then we just put their team, their product area label on it.
Yeah, and if you have that issue handy, if there is one, Mac, it'd be great if you could add it.
Yep, we'll do.
Yeah, so that would be, because this is not an idle MR problem. This is a MR problem. It just happens to be, it's a large percentage of the idle ones. But yeah, so, and Kyle, you had some thoughts too.
Yeah, so Mech, on your first point, we do have that inference by author. It's just limited. So we read in from Team YAML, and there's some deterministic logic on, if you have this listed in your department, this is the label that's applied. I can dig up that information, but that logic is implemented at least somewhat. It's not a complete one-to-one for every author.
Kyle, is that in place already, or?
Yes.
We are, okay. So these are slipping through the cracks.
Right.
I think it's under 2C. I think that's what Kyle's talking about. That issue is closed, so it's likely we needed that issue to close the gap.
So,
Yeah.
please go.
We have that data in Bamboo now too, to distinguish which member is a part of what group, but I don't think it maps back to the specific stage. I think that was something that they did recently to connect Bamboo data all the way to SciSense.
And that's where we're one more point on that is we're kind of limited in what we can infer from data that's accessible in an API or like that we can consume in a YAML file. So we haven't really, I don't know how we can digest that data then make that actionable, the Bamboo data.
So it sounds like well, before we talk about action, so Christopher, you had a comment.
Yeah, like you were saying, there's no trend, but it does look like there's a little bit of a positive trend. I wouldn't necessarily say it's probably still too early to tell because of the cyclical nature.
I didn't wait for SciSense to refresh for the latest week. So yeah, so I take that back. There is a good trend in the right direction.
Yeah, the one thing I was curious about is whether we think that would be hitting us on the mean time to merge, because mean time to merge is up pretty dramatically, and I've attributed that mostly in the month of May and June around the fact that we've had long weekends for friends and family. We actually had a dead day where there were no merges, which we haven't had in a really long time. And then also the other one was, which wasn't Friends and Family Day, it was the Saturday after Friends and Family Day, curiously enough. But then the other one is this could be affecting it too, and I didn't know if
like sheer numbers in 1 week from June 22nd to June 29th, 100 MRs are no longer showing as idle.
What's the criteria for being idle? 2 weeks?
Idle is it 2 weeks, Lily? I think it's 2 weeks. Or was it 30 days? I think it's 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it might be that they were closed without being merged, or probably a number of them were merged. So, and if they're idle more than 2 weeks, some of them were probably idle a really long time. So we don't know, but it's roughly about 100 in a week, which is a pretty big.
Yeah, that explains it, because if it's 2 weeks, that's 1,400. That's easily a half a day, just doing the simple math. Okay, so then that's what I'll put in my group conversation tomorrow. Hey, mean time to merge is up, by the way. It's because we're actually cutting it down, and maybe I'll include this graph. Thanks for sharing that.
Good stuff. So, Mech and Kyle and Lily, you all seem to have a really good handle on what the next step should be to improve this, but I didn't record it, so who knows who wants to describe what we should do?
So step one that I think we can do, like I'll create the issue that Mac talked about to close the gap further from author inference. I think we can consider project, like more default project labeling. So when I looked at the distribution that Lily shared in one of the comments up above, I noticed there was just a number of projects where there should be a clear, this belongs to group blah, like group A. And I put some of the suggested ones that I had. We can just look to expand that. I think that's a pretty simple, boring solution to drive that number down across all MRs, not just idle MRs.
Will the author thing be encompassing? Meaning we need to think about if members contribute cross product areas, so their managers should be pushing them to have those MRs, or do you want, for example, like somebody in plan contributes to runner, right? Yeah. So that MR, do we want it to be by default just like verify? I'm okay with both, as long as there's a DRI holding the ball, whichever team it is, to just drive it through. But just clearly saying that because I want to do less for more. If we're able to address something with this one solution.
I think the engineering manager who gets it, who's the DRI on that group would go, it should, and the product manager, it should go on their radar as, hey, this is in my group, and they should be triage is not the right, they should be vetting them, trying to use the right word there, and if it's not in their group, reassigning it, right? The unknown, no group means it's likely not on the radar. The wrong group, it should get on somebody's radar. And then if that somebody is the wrong somebody, then they should, find the right group.
Yep, agreed.
And Mac, just to dive into that a little bit more, are you talking about the author-based inference?
Yeah.
So how that works is it leaves a comment that says, GitLab bot will leave a comment that says, I'm applying group ecosystem based on this person's group. So the intent there is that it's clear why that group label is inferred, so that if a participant in the MR wants to change it, there's a signal to at least change it. It mentions the author, for example.
Right. Right. So what I'm saying is that we could just double down on that and implement it globally on all projects, and we don't have to come up with another work track on having default labels for each project. That would be like, it should cover all cases rather than just do two things.
Yeah, yeah, good point. I would need to look into it. My recollection when we first did it is we would need to go through and revamp team.yaml, which is what we were using for the single source of truth for that inference, to have individuals set their departments, sub-departments, like groups clearly, because that's what's being used. And then there's some GitLab team members who had multiple, so we can't do a one-to-one inference. There was just a number of exceptions as we started to dive into that needed data cleanup that we just didn't pursue in the first iteration. Those can all be things that we pursue, but that's why I think the default label solution might be easier to start with, because it requires less collective action.
Okay. Up to you. You're the DRI. Treat my comment as a suggestion, and then
Okay.
please just take it forward.
Okay. Cool. I'll run the default labeling too by the team. They might see a problem with that. We already have a number of scheduled pipelines. This would add one for every single project, or at least every group. And the EP team, it's already a little unwieldy. So we have to balance that trade-off of how much complexity do we want in our batch triage process for the benefit. And Lily, I think you've been trying to say something for a while, so I'm going to stop talking so you can get in here.
No, I just wanted to make a comment from before about how the graph is displaying the number of idle MRs. So basically we look at, for every single week, how many MRs have no activity in the past 28 days. And so that's charted by week. So in the past week, we've dropped 100 in total. So just to clarify, it's in the past 28 days. We can shift it to past 14 days, as I think, Kyle, that's how the code is running, right? The triage reports.
We went back and forth on it, so I need to just double check. I don't feel confident in a direct answer off the top of my head. Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, but so Wayne just wanted to clarify there that our charts are showing idle MRs based on activity in the past 28 days, and that's showing it charted by week.
Yep.
The policy is 28 days. That can be changed to 14, so it's older than.
Yeah, I'm not saying it should change. I was just remembering wrong. Yep, maybe it should change, but that's not. I'm definitely not advocating that today, at least. Cool. So 5 minutes left in scheduled time. Item 3. Which of these metrics? So we did idle time, which is great. There are other metrics we want to look at and potentially add to that triage report and rename it. It would no longer be about idle; it'd be idle and other things. And so it is statistically significant. That's maybe too strong of a term, but I'll say it. If the number of various things, metrics like assignments, pipelines, files, change lines, change threads are more than X, then it's likely going to be an idle. It's likely going to take longer to merge than we want it to be. I know, Kyle, you mentioned in the past that for the data that's available in the API, it's much easier to enhance things versus if we'd have to we know we have the data in Sisense, but we really don't want to necessarily integrate the bot with Sisense. We'd rather hit the GitLab product itself. So which of these things are in the API?
My understanding is none. So there's no way to say for an MR how many assignments, pipeline, and total assignments. That you can say how many people are currently assigned, but you can't get how many assignments have happened on the MR. And I might be wrong, but that's my current understanding is all of these things.
I see in your notes here, it might be available in the GraphQL API.
Yes.
I'm not sure how. Where's a good thoughts on where this question to everybody, good places to go to determine this in the GraphQL API?
There might be a Slack channel that I can just ask in. We'll see. Yeah, there's an fGraphQL. I'll take the action to ask.
Thank you. So let's say it's not available. There's two options. We ask, well, which are not mutually exclusive. There's more than two. There's starting with two. Ask the teams that maintain those APIs to add. Two, do it ourselves. Everybody can contribute, but we, at least the folks on the, on our teams it may take us a lot longer to do it than the teams who generally do it. And the third is we get the data in the interim from Sisense. Which path or paths seem the best ways to go, maybe in the short term and separately in the long term?
I'll chime in. I'll vote on getting more facets and dimension on complexity. I think we're reducing costs by a lot this quarter. If you look at the charts that the EP team has, I think that will continue to go down. So calibrate on that maybe a bit too early. I think we should get more data on complexity. If people are breaking down things far enough or not. Because Christopher wants to has something on pipelines and other things, so feel free to vocalize.
Yeah, I mean, pipelines is interesting because we pay, I think, $2 per pipeline, and so there might be cost considerations around that, but I don't know if that necessarily relates to mean time to merge. So I'm highly interested in seeing that one, but just completely unmotivated for this particular task. I think Mecca's got the right mindset, which is the complexity aspects. I'm a little hesitant on lines of change because when Kyle and I looked at this before, we saw high variance with these like crazy, one MR, but it's doing like the same thing everywhere. So it's, it's like basically something with it. So it's really hard to figure out, like, just because it's above a certain threshold, that it's really actually complexity that's the issue. I wonder if threads is actually a better option here, in particular unresolved threads. But to be clear,
lines
is around complexity, and that's really what I'm trying to drive home. So if we think we can get the right data with the lines of change, I'm totally good with going in that direction as well.
Sorry if I interject. I think the unicorn here is actually the level structure that's changed, because you can have multiple lines change in just one controller, and that's not that complex. But if people are making changes in a lot of folders, so you're touching the control, you're touching front end, you're touching database in one MR, that's the complexity we want to know. And I'm not sure if we get that information with the diffs. Do you know, Kyle? Like the list of folders that will change, not necessarily the files.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think where we're landing here is Kyle will research it if it's in GraphQL by asking in a Slack channel or two, and we'll see where that gets us or doesn't get us. And then the next one we want to implement is likely either pipelines or threads.
So I totally agree with the approach. The one thing I want to call out on this whole discussion, every single one of these things would require significant time from the EP team. So pulling it in from Sisense, even pulling it in from the GraphQL, we don't have a GraphQL adapter in our GitLab Triage gem right now. It's going to require a lot of effort. So focusing on one and then saying, EP team, what is the simplest way to get this information in, might lead us to a more creative solution than what we're able to figure out on the call.
That's a good point.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for that. Appreciate that.
So, and by EP team, which team is that?
Engineering productivity team. Yeah.
Engineering productivity team. Okay.
So maybe we defer which one specifically until we get better visibility into what it's going to take. That's your recommendation.
Yeah, that's what I'd recommend. Let me ask on GraphQL, and then I can ask the team. I know it's very inefficient and will take a while. If there is one thing that you feel is the most important, we can track how long it's going to take and pursue that one thing, or at least see how long that one thing will take simultaneously. But I'd like to pause.
No,
absolutely.
Another potential approach is since the data is in Sisense, is we create some, we added the dashboard or add a new dashboard on, the top lists of them. So not an issue, not a triage issue, but a list of, the list of MRs that have assignments greater than 10 or pipelines greater than 20 or et cetera. And that might be a good, simple, boring solution first and also low cost. It's not as good as the triage issue because it doesn't push it to people to take a look at the ones that are theirs. But I don't know, Lily, if that's something you'd want to take on, but basically have a list of those in a dashboard. And then we ask the engineering managers to look at the ones that are on that list. And it won't necessarily say whose is which, whose belongs to who, but it at least bring light to those. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we have that somewhere in Sisense. So I can like break it down so that we can see the list of MRs for each variable we're looking at. So for example, one where assignments is greater than 10 and then one for pipelines greater than 20 and so forth. But
Cool.
I think it's in here somewhere.
Thank you. And then it might even be good, and we can work on the list, but do it iteratively and minimal viable change as you go. Is one idea would be to have one list of MRs that have some property that flags them as something to potentially look at, and then you put in the list why. And it could be more than one reason. It could be because it's idle. It could be because it has more than X threads or whatever, or maybe separate lists. That's fine too.
Maybe one more. So that's a really great idea. Maybe one thing to consider, because the triage report, the non-clickability of the triage report, might be worth getting feedback from other engineering managers just to see if what we're doing in the triage report should also be on the dashboard where it could be clickable and probably faster for action from them. I'm not trying to get away from the triage report, but I think that might be more efficient overall.
I think on some of the things, Lily, you've done, they're clickable. I've noticed, which is awesome. So I think we can continue to make them clickable in this new thing or whatever you're going to modify. That'd be great. I was surprised when it was clickable and pleasantly surprised because it works so well. So we're over time, but that's okay. Mech, do you want to go over the last item you're putting in there?
Yeah, I just want to let our stakeholders here know that we are making progress and we are now under 15 minutes for the first time in average pipeline time. So
Woo!
it's coming together. Thank you for all your patience. And Kyle, kudos to you. Just want to let everybody know that all the work you've been doing.
All the team. I don't do any of that work.
Yep, it's all the team. It's engineering as a whole because we get help from other backend engineers too. So thank you.
And I know we skipped over number 4, but I saw some comments. Yeah, I'll schedule another discussion in a month. But let's continue as we have been, talking asynchronously via Slack and issues and et cetera. But good stuff. I think this is a awesome discussion.
Thanks for leading it, Wayne. Have a good one.
Oh, sure. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.